Hi, I'm Bill Sang, and this is the Bill Sang Podcast. I'd like to welcome you to today's episode. And we're going to be talking about some pretty exciting things that at first you're not going to think they're connected at all. We're going to be talking about gas prices and education and energy in general and just the entire state of the world. But before we get into all of that, I would like to tell you about something that has just revolutionized my life. And I have to say that lots of exciting things are happening with the Bill Sang podcast right now, and we give all glory to God in relation to that. But I have to tell you about how it is that we got into podcasting to begin with. It's called Buzzsprout. You go to buzzsprout.com and they make it so easy for you to get started. Even have a free option for you to post your podcast for free. But if you want to improve the quality, there are paid subscriptions as well. I'm grateful for Buzzsprout. I think that if you're thinking about signing up to do a podcast, Buzzsprout is the provider for you. Once you post your podcast, you have the option of selecting what platforms you want it on. You can put it on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many other big name podcast providers. So again, that is buzzsprout.com. If you click the link in the description, you will get a $25 off discount on your next Amazon purchase. Again, that is buzzsprout.com. And once again, I'd like to thank you for joining us for the Bill Sang Podcast.
Black Swan Blues, take me home. Black Swan Blues, take me home.
Hi, I'm Bill Sang. I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's podcast. We have a bunch of topics we're going to be talking about today. And first of all, I want to start off by saying, isn't it incredible how COVID all of a sudden has vanished from the face of the planet, at least from America? I don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, but in America, I guess that COVID went the way of the flu, isn't rearing its face anymore, or maybe it's on vacation. I don't know. I think that I heard on the television not too long ago that it plans on making a comeback sometime in some form or another. But that has not been the focus of the world's attention these days. These days, everything is focused on Ukraine. In America, we've been very much focused on gas prices. A lot of well-meaning people have been saying, why are you so concerned about gas prices? These $4 a gallon gas prices. I mean, there's bigger things in the world going on right now. Look at Ukraine. There's people dying over there. Russia's invading. Who knows what's going to come of all this? Maybe it's going to be World War III. I get it. I understand that. And yes, Ukraine is a bigger problem, but it is not unrelated to our energy cost problem in general in the United States and across the world. You see, this is the problem that I have with the gas prices. And it's not that I'm greedy. It's not that I think that we should pillage our natural resources. What really bothers me is how we got there. We shut down the Keystone Pipeline, and immediately we see gas prices plummet. And I know some people say, well, that has nothing to do with the administration. No, it has everything to do with the current administration right now. They're making these decisions to drive gas prices up and to make it a lot more difficult to access fossil fuels. Years back, I believe it was Barack Obama who said that he is going to drive the fossil fuel industry out of business. Wow. Well, how do you do that? Well, you make it so unaffordable that you can't purchase it. If you don't think that that's a possibility, well, look at nuclear energy. I know that most people, when they think of nuclear energy, they think of The Simpsons. They think of Mr. Burns and the nuclear power plant, who has this just malicious intent toward the world and all the people around him. More or less, that's the vision that we get of nuclear energy, and just nuclear waste everywhere. Storing it in the water, in the mountains, in every place. But truth be told, nuclear energy is pretty much the safest form of energy in the world in terms of its cleanliness, in terms of pollution. People, nuclear energy is carbon neutral, zero carbon emissions from nuclear energy. You would think that environmentalists would love nuclear energy. On top of that, you don't have to pillage the world's resources to get nuclear energy. What is nuclear energy to begin with? Well, atomic energy, of course, is when you split the atom. Okay, so everything around us is made out of atoms, right? So atomic energy is abundant. What's nuclear energy? It's a step further. You split the nucleus of the atom, and that's where nuclear energy comes from. And so we've learned how to harness something that is inside of everything around us. Forget water. Everything around us has atoms that have nuclei inside of them. And so it is an infinitely abundant resource. Yes, it has its risks, it has its challenges. But what I'm getting at here is they've made nuclear energy so unaffordable that it's rare. You don't see it very many places today, and yet nuclear energy is so efficient. Well, as I mentioned before, Barack Obama said that he was going to drive the fossil fuel industry out of business. Well, the current administration has derived itself from Barack Obama's ideology. They worked for Barack Obama. And the reason why we are where we are right now with our gas prices is because they're trying to fulfill his vision of driving the fossil fuel industry out of business. And the solution to these gas prices is so simple. All you got to do is open up the Keystone Pipeline again. And you recall at the end of the Obama administration, we made an incredible discovery called fracking. And because of that, gas prices started to go down under him. Under the past administration, Donald Trump's administration, they went down even further. And now we're like at something like a 300% increase in gas prices since Donald Trump was in office. Now, where are we going with all this? How does this relate to world affairs? Well, what this tells me is that we have leaders in America and across the world who really don't care about you and me. They have malicious intent. They don't just have apathy toward the average person. They want to cause pain, and they want to make sure that you know that you are subordinate to them. Now, having said this, do you think that the current administration is going to stop using Air Force One? That uses fossil fuel. Do you think he's going to stop using the transport vehicle that we call the Beast? Well, first of all, that's an SUV. And yes, it uses fossil fuels. So the world leaders are allowed to use as much in terms of fossil fuels, nuclear energy, whatever it is that they... we talk about nuclear warfare right now. That's a legitimate threat in terms of Russia and Ukraine. And we're talking about nuclear warfare, which of course derives its energy from the same source as a nuclear power plant. Nuclear energy, okay? So world leaders are able to harness these sorts of things at their whim. But when it comes to the average person, we can't. Take a look at Africa. Africa is a place that is in poverty. There is lots of government corruption inside of Africa. And a lot of this stems from the reality that Africa is not allowed to use its own resources to make money. It's being protected, so to speak, by the environmentalist movement, so that they cannot harness the energy in their own land, so they cannot harvest the resources in their own land, bring people out of poverty, save them from diseases, and ultimately save millions of lives inside of Africa. Ultimately, it all boils down to the same handful of people making those sorts of decisions as what are making decisions to suppress our oil production inside of the United States. Now, we're going to get how this relates to other topics here in a minute, but lately, my wife and I, we've been revisiting and rereading a book series that I started writing a number of years ago. And currently, by the way, one of the reasons why we're revisiting this book series is because I am in process of writing book number 4 right now. First book in the series is called The Wrath of Gigantus Rex. The Wrath of Gigantus Rex. Now, I have to say, when I wrote these books, The first one, The Wrath of Gigonatus Rex. The second one, Gigonatus Rex, The Battle of Midland. And the third one in the series is Gigonatus Rex, The Orphans of Eden. And when I started reading these books, I saw the writing on the wall in so many different ways. Government corruption, how evil government leaders are and everything. My wife, she's been revisiting them, and she's been amazed, particularly by the characters and the plot, that the plot and the people are almost prophetic of what is going on right now.
Black Swan Blues.
I'm going to have my wife, Melissa, on with me right now. So, Melissa, how are you doing right now?
I'm doing good.
Good. And you've been, you just finished reading The Wrath of Gigonatus Rex, right?
Correct.
And what were your observations about The Wrath of Gigonatus Rex?
First of all, the book was very fun to read, and I read it to our two boys, and they very much enjoy it. I enjoy the characters a lot, and they enjoy the monsters.
With William Martin Stevens is his full name, and I want to point out that he's actually a composite character. He is a combination of the main character from 1984, who his job is to essentially revise history, and also from a character in the Americanized version of the original Godzilla movie by the name of Stephen Martin, who was played by Raymond Burr all those years back. So I have a lot of sentimentality toward him, and I thought to myself, how do I make this as an homage to that? And I thought to myself, well, I could flip the name, Stephen Martin, and make it Martin Stevens. And I was like, but I can't make it that obvious. So I was like, I'll put one more name in it. What name do I pick? William sounds like a good name. But there's a lot of other characters in it as well, a lot of other themes in it. What else did you like, Melissa?
I appreciated that William was just clueless. He was just a reporter, and reporters shaping society, and that's their goal. So it's funny once William discovers what's to be the real truth in the book, and he says, "One day it appeared that I lived a normal life. The next I was questioning everything that I once believed to be true." There's so many funny characters too, like Murakoshi. Bill says basically he thinks he's Batman. He appears out of nowhere to do good.
This is really funny, and I didn't even think about this before, because I did say that he thinks that he's Batman. And there's actually an old Adam West Batman episode where Batman, I think that his mind got taken over or something. He breaks out in like this wild dance, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" When you said about him dance, you're right. He Murakoshi, and that guy is one of my favorite characters. He might be my favorite character in the series thus far, because he's an interesting character. Yes. In order to summon an ancient monster, he actually has, and that's ultimately what gets the story, what drives the story forward, is that there's giant monsters on the planet, and they're learning how to basically fight them, cope with them, what have you, how to deal with them, essentially.
There's just a lot of purity in the relationships you see, because William befriends these villagers, and it represents Christians that are just trying to live good lives, or trying to pursue peace and just
honor God.
Yeah, and honor God. And so you see that throughout the book. Of course, there's monsters, and a lot of people are just maybe really drawn to the monsters. I'm so drawn to the characters, because there's such a genuineness.
There's definitely there's a plot that goes behind the existence and the battles of the monsters inside of the books. And the first one revolves mostly, in terms of monsters, revolves around Gigonatus Rex, the title character, and what his purpose is ultimately in this grand scheme of things. Gigonatus, and the Wrath of Gigonatus Rex, by the way, is very plot oriented. I would say that percentage-wise, there's far less monster action than what there is character development throughout the story. And it deals with issues that back then were coming to light, and now, wow, I would say they're past coming to light. I would say they're walking around in broad daylight now. And then the second book, and we're not going to talk a whole lot about the second one right now, but Gigonautus Rex, The Battle of Midland, kind of expounds on it, and it shows how these actually great events that happened at the end of book number 1 are now taken, co-opted, and twisted into stories that are barely recognizable when they're presented to the public, because the media's gotten their hands on them. The government has an idea of what they want the people to think, and so that's what they start running with. Which, by the way, I don't know if I should mention this right now or not, but George, I believe he's, you see that he gets promoted in book number 2. He actually is based off of a real life character. At least I can't remember if I named him first or if I in trying to find who I can model him after, named him after I already wrote his character. I can't remember, but there was a person in real life. I guess I'll leave that a mystery for right now. Some people might be able to guess, but he actually is based off a real life person. And I'm still not exactly sure where I want George to end up in terms of what side he ends up aligning with, the good guys or the bad guys. But part of me wants to eventually make him see the light so that he finally is like, I think that the way I've lived my life in the past was wrong, basically.
Well, that makes me excited because I see him as a guy that could be a good guy because he just is wanting to do his job well.
Yeah, he's like I like to say, he's not hurting anybody, but he's not helping anybody right now. So his character could very easily go either direction. But I really am leaning toward him eventually making this switch to coming to the light side of the force.
One of the quotes I like at the end of the book, it says, "I used to think that monsters were bad. Now I know that there are different kinds of monsters. There are monsters who enslave and terrorize others. Then there are monsters who oppose the evil ones. They are avengers." So could you talk a little bit about that? It's pretty deep.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think that's in the last chapter of the book, right?
Yeah.
And my goodness, if you aren't interested with anything we're saying about the wrath of Gigonautus Rex right now, the last chapter, at the very least, is 100% worth it. I read that chapter and we were done with the editing and everything, and I was like, and when I say we, I'm talking about my wife and I, because she's done a lot of the editing, but I read it and I was like, did we really write that? I mean, it was really, really impressive. And that quote you just read, and I can't remember if it says it expressly like that, like what I'm thinking right now, but because again, it's been a while since I've actually read word for word, but there are monsters who enslave and terrorize others. Then there are monsters who oppose the evil ones. And the way that I at least wanted to say it was there are monsters to monsters. And basically that, we see these evil entities. And this is how I kind of think about it, like biblically speaking. Okay, so we're going to the Bible, and Israel, back in Old Testament times, they'd been conquered a number of times by bad people. But then eventually what would happen? Somebody would come along and conquer those bad people. And somebody would come along and conquer those bad people. So it's kind of along those lines, but actually, oh my goodness, I don't know if I should, this would be another big behind the scenes, inside of my brain sort of secret. Should I
go ahead.
Should I go full bore with it?
Yeah.
So, during this time, this had to have been around the 2016 presidential election. I can't remember if it was afterwards or if it was before. At the very least, I know I was hopeful about what was going to come result from that election. And you have this guy, I don't know if you've heard of him, his name is Donald Trump. And when he got the nomination, now before he got the nomination, I still kind of supported him, but he wasn't my number one pick to run for president. But when he started his campaign, he became a monster to monsters in terms of that he was this entity that big government and big businesses who were in league with big government did not know how to deal with. That there is nothing they could do. They couldn't buy him off. They couldn't tell him what to think. They had people on the Republican side of the aisle trying to manipulate him, and they couldn't do it. And that's how I really saw, actually, I mean, there's more to Jiggonautus Rex than Donald Trump. That's not who he is in this story. But I actually drew quite a bit of inspiration in terms of that in writing this part, that he is this monster to monsters that is beholden to nobody, acts according to the way that he wants to, and nobody can chain him up, no matter what they try, because they hold nothing over his head. He's a monster. And who Jiggonautus Rex, though, actually is supposed to represent, he's supposed to be representative of God. And I'm not saying that he is God in this book. He's representative of God and teaches us about God. And God, in many respects, he is the ultimate monster to monsters. That evil can oppress, and they might even think that they win in this lifetime. But at the end, they have this monster to who they are that they're going to have to face one day, that strikes more fear into their hearts than what they ever struck into the hearts of those that they sought to oppress.
Yes, and to go along with that, Bill has a quote in the first chapter of the book that the first chapter is amazing also, but he says, man's authority over this world is nothing more than an illusion. And so, like, wow, like that really sets up the character of G-Rex, because we see throughout the whole book that anytime the rulers try to exert their power, G-Rex shows up, and, you know, he rescues people, and, you know, so it's a book that gives you hope. You know, you see so much evil, you see it in the book, you see it in our life, and it's like, wow, this book really helps give you hope, because obviously the Bible's our source of hope, but it helps us to see, like, God really does show up, you know, when we need him.
And what I try to do to communicate that further is when William Stevens comes in contact with what I call the rulers. The rulers are the government leaders, and he comes in contact with for all intents and purposes, the highest ranking government ruler, and she is telling him about her perception of Jiggonautus Rex. To her, the world's governments, authorities have been tracking Jiggonautus Rex throughout history, that he's been around a long time. And every time it looks like that some empire is about to take over the world, Jiggonautus Rex shows up secretly inside of history and throws a wrench into the works, at least makes an appearance. And it is, you know, what lots of times they like to call signs back then, that something was about to happen to ruin these great empires, to destroy their power and restore, I guess, direct God's plan in the way that it was really supposed to go. I mean, and there's times like that in history when it looks like nothing can possibly change, nothing can possibly direct us towards God, and yet something has happened historically every single time to get us back on track with our Creator. And at the end of the day, you know, I believe it's Isaiah 14, when it's talking about the king of Assyria and how he sees himself as this great and powerful angel who's going to ascend above God and all that. And it said that at the end, people are going to look at you and think you look silly. People are going to say, this is really the person who shook the foundations of the earth. And that's what's going to come of all the corruption and evil going on at the world leadership level today. So we're going to look at them one day and be like, really? Really?
Yeah, and I know you've said if we ever see Satan, he's going to be really short, you know. Well, God is huge.
Yeah. Black Swan Blues, take me home.
So we just got done talking about The Wrath of Jiggonautus Rex, this book that I wrote a number of years ago. Again, we were saying that it's somewhat prophetic. And this part where it talks about when William Martin Stevens is looking for information. He finds it inside of children's books because that's the only information that was available to him that hadn't been censored yet. And I start thinking then about raising our kids, about the institutions that exist today. We talked about gas price. We mentioned Ukraine and just the horrible things that are happening right there. But what those are reflections of, especially when I think of the gas prices, yes, Ukraine obviously, but when I think about the gas prices here in the United States, it's the absolute corruption of government institutions. There's not many people inside of government you can trust anymore. And in fact, there's not many corporations you can trust anymore because they're in league with government powers. I was talking to Melissa not too long ago, and I said, think about what it is that the government controls right now. Like they have FEMA, the EPA, they have the FDA, the FBI, the CIA, the post office. I mean, they have all these, the Board of Education. You have these institutions that the government has corrupted, that they have control over, and it's incredible that so many people trust them now. I mean, when I think about it, it used to be that the BMV was terrible, that their reputation was that the people at the BMV were mean and nasty. I tell you what, the BMV has become the best government institution, the best bureau that there is right now, I believe. And these other ones have just totally lost their way, have become corrupt, and have become oppressive, suppressive. They want nothing to do with preserving the freedom of the American people, but instead want to rob us of it so far that they don't even want us to be able to shape the values. Never mind the things that our children learn in terms of just pure knowledge, but they don't even want us instilling our own values in our children anymore. Once again, I got Melissa right here with me to talk about this topic. So government institutions, you're a big fan of them, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. A thought that came to my mind as you were talking, and I mentioned it earlier, is that, we have been taught to trust all these institutions, but the one that we haven't been trusting is the church and the family unit. And those are the most important because we may never be able to trust any of those government institutions, but the ones that God set in place, is the church and the family. And so the last things that you want to give up are those institutions. Obviously, unfortunately, many families fall apart, but that's because we are valuing so much of these government institutions where we need to get back to valuing what God has set up for us.
Yeah, and these government institutions, they may or may not have been good when they were founded and intended for good things. To that, I can't really speak of. I know that in some respects, probably not. But regardless of the intent in their founding, that there was high hopes for them. People really put a lot of trust in them. They were staffed up in ways that were good. I mean, most of our teachers growing up, I would say, were pretty decent people, and they had pretty decent values, and they very much honored our freedom inside of the classrooms for within reasonable measures, of course. But these days, wow. And I think that a lot of it boils down to that there's a lot of pressure, and this is a common tactic. There's a lot of pressure to do what everybody else is doing, to do what we call normal. And the Bible, Jesus himself said that wide is the gate that leads to destruction, and many, you get that? Many enter through it.
We have to say, what do we value?
Yeah, and I think that I think that, you see, what we're living in right now, it is governed by a system. And our involvement with certain entrepreneurial groups has taught us that the typical way of thinking, and this is the system we're talking about, that You're born, you go to school, you go off to college to learn how to get a good job, and then you work that job the rest of your life until you die, basically. That's the system. Now, overall, is there anything wrong with... We all are going to go to school and on some level and get a job on some level. The problem is that it's not that pattern itself that is wrong. It is the fact that the government is using schools as a means to teach you that all you need to worry about is yourself. All you need to think about is the next step. When I mentioned about George Matthews, basically in my book, The Wrath of Gigantotus Rex, his problem is that he doesn't care about anything or anybody. All he cares is that his actions will bring him the next promotion. That's how so many people live. Yesterday I was listening to John Maxwell on the John Maxwell podcast. He was talking about players and pretenders. And he said that pretenders, players are the good guys, pretenders are the bad guys, just to make it simple right there. Players are the ones who care about people and all that. Pretenders, they have this pattern of only pursuing what they want. And as a result, they almost never get what they want. Even if they get the promotion, even if they get the position that they want to have, they ultimately never achieve what they want. They're never satisfied, ultimately because they are pursuing empty promises.
In The Wrath of Gigantotus Rex, which is the first book in the series, William learns that he has to live a different way. He says at the end of the book, it's not going to be easy, but he infers that it's going to be life-changing and beneficial.
And William, in this book, the funny thing is about his character is he actually has a dark past as well. That being that he has done all the wrong things. And it's been for the sake of success. He knew that if he did what he was told, essentially, even though his character is portrayed as somewhat of a trailblazer, but he's still stuck inside of this system where he's still operating by their rules. He's operating within the boundaries of the rules of the rulers, and because of that, he's still doing the wrong thing at the end of the day, until he has this transformation throughout the book. And I think that that's what a lot of people are caught in right now. Is that they're operating inside of the system. They might be trying to do things a little bit differently, but only so far as the rules will allow them to do. And I think that's a dangerous way of living. The reality is that we need to know where to draw the line on things. How far do we allow the rules to dictate us? How far we are willing to go before we finally say, okay, this is in violation of my values. And you have a choice to make at that point. Do you change your values? Or do you take a risk? And I think that the biblical answer is, you never change your values. Jaden and Carter, I think this is really remarkable about them. Last night we were talking and they brought up about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the book of Daniel, the three who were thrown into the fiery furnace, because what is it they wouldn't do? They wouldn't bow to the statue. They wouldn't worship the false idol. But everybody else was doing it. And so in our culture, we might say, well, I mean, if that was today, people would be looking at them and pointing their fingers saying, look at those people. You guys need to bow to the statue. But it's wrong. Who cares? Do you want to be killed? Bow to the statue. And they said, we will never bow to the statue. Go ahead and kill us.
Yeah, and the Bible says to not gain the whole world and forfeit your soul.
And what we talk about all the time, and I preach about all the... I'm sorry if the people in my church get sick of this, but what I preach on all the time, read your Bible. Know what the Bible says. Forget what all the experts say. I mean, I'm not saying that all the experts are bad But you would think so these days. I mean, it seems like there's not an expert alive anymore, at least that appears on television, that has good intentions towards humanity. Read the Bible. Know what the Bible says. The book of Romans says to be transformed by the renewing of your mind and not to give in to the patterns of the world. I don't think it can be any more clear than that we as Christians are not supposed to live like the rest of the world, and we're not supposed to think like the rest of the world. We are supposed to be different. And the early church, they were willing to die for their beliefs. Today, we have a hard time praying in public schools. I mean, where we have freedom. They might kick you out if you're caught praying in a public school. But, wow, I think that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would have been like, suspended? Oh, great. That's fantastic. That's really, you're just going to suspend me for this, right? Or give me a detention. Well, that's not too bad. It's not being thrown into a fiery furnace, is it? And mind you, I'm not putting this on the kids right now. Parents, is it worth it to put your children in that position to where they have to make the face stand? I think we as parents, we should be making the face stand. It should not be on our children. It should be on us because God has made us responsible for their faith and for their lives. I'd like to thank you again for joining us for this episode of the Bill is Saying podcast. To get more episodes, remember to check us out at iHeartRadio, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Rumble, wherever you can find your podcast. Check us out there. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Down in the Black Swamp, that's where I